After several empty magazines, the rifle starts spitting instead of firing. That's how Russian soldiers describe one of their most infamous weapons, the AKS-74U. Here was a rifle that looked absolutely lethal, compact enough to fit in a briefcase, and carried the legendary Kalashnikov name. It should have been perfect. Instead, it became one of the most hated weapons in the Russian military. Today, we're diving into the story of how the Soviet Union's attempt to create the perfect compact weapon resulted in what soldiers called a spitting disaster, and why trying to please everyone ended up pleasing absolutely no one. The story begins in 1973 with something called the Modern Project. The Soviet military had a problem. After retiring the reliable PPS and PPS submachine guns, they suddenly realized they had a massive gap in their arsenal. Tank crews, pilots, artillerymen, and vehicle drivers were stuck with either underpowered APS pistols that couldn't hit anything beyond 30 meters, or the full-sized AKMS rifle that was far too bulky for cramped vehicle interiors. The request came from multiple military branches simultaneously. Paratroopers wanted something more compact than the standard rifle. Special forces needed a weapon that could work in tight spaces. Vehicle crews desperately needed something between a pistol and a full rifle. And pilots needed something they could actually carry without it becoming a burden. The solution seemed obvious. Create one weapon that could serve all these different roles. The Modern Project was launched to develop exactly that, a compact automatic carbine that could replace all these different weapons with a single, versatile design. Several of the Soviet Union's most legendary weapon designers submitted prototypes. Igor Steshkin, creator of the APS pistol, presented the TKB-0116. Sergei Simonov, designer of the SKS carbine, offered the AG-043. Alexander Konstantinov submitted the AEK-958. Yevgeny Dragunov, famous for his sniper rifle, presented the MA model. And then there was Mikhail Kalashnikov, whose PP-1 design would eventually become the AKS-74U. In retrospect, the outcome was probably inevitable. As one military historian noted, anything Kalashnikov invented was going to be accepted by the Soviet high command, good or bad. The other designers had little chance from the beginning. Kalashnikov's design won primarily because it shared almost all components with the new AK-74 family, making production extremely simple. It also featured a special muzzle device that suppressed flash and reduced sound, perfect for special operations and vehicle use. The weapon was so compact it could literally fit in a briefcase, leading to some interesting applications we'll discuss later. In 1979, after 6 years of development and testing, the AKS-74U was officially adopted. The new weapon became an essential part of the Soviet arsenal and was distributed to vehicle crews, pilots, paratroopers, and special forces. On paper, it was the perfect hybrid between a submachine gun and an assault rifle. Reality, however, had very different plans. The fundamental design challenge was simple. Take a full-size rifle and cut the barrel in half. The AKS-74U barrel was shortened from the standard rifle length to just 8.3 inches. This created a cascade of problems that would plague the weapon throughout its service life. First, there was the incomplete powder burn. When you fire a rifle cartridge, the gunpowder needs time and space to burn completely inside the barrel. With half the barrel length gone, the powder gases didn't have enough time to burn completely. This created two major problems: less gas pressure to cycle the weapon's action, and more unburnt powder fouling up the barrel and mechanisms. The result was a weapon that got dirty faster and had more reliability issues than its full-size cousins. But that wasn't even the worst part. The incomplete powder burn also created what soldiers called insane muzzle flash. Every time you pulled the trigger, it was like setting off a flashbang in front of your face. Not only was this uncomfortable for the shooter, but it completely gave away your position to anyone within miles. Soviet engineers tried to fix this with a more effective flash suppressor, but as soldiers quickly discovered, it didn't really help. The shortened barrel also forced engineers to move the front sight closer to the rear sight. This is a fundamental problem in rifle design. The greater the distance between your front and rear sights, the more accurately you can aim. With the front sight moved forward, they had to relocate the rear sight to the dust cover. And since AK dust covers aren't exactly known for being stable, they had to make it hinge for extra support. The result was a sighting system that was inherently less accurate, than the standard rifle. Soldiers reported that the AKS-74U's accuracy and precision were about 2 to 2.5 times lower than the regular AK-74. Combined with the weapon's lighter weight, which increased recoil and barrel deviation during burst fire, hitting targets became significantly more difficult. But perhaps the most infamous problem was what soldiers called the spitting issue. The AKS-74U suffered from rapid overheating, unlike other AK variants. As soldiers used to say, after several empty magazines, the rifle starts spitting instead of shooting. This overheating was so severe that it fundamentally changed how the weapon could be used. Instead of sustained automatic fire, soldiers were forced to use it only in short bursts or semi-automatic mode. For a weapon designed to provide rapid firepower in close quarters, this was a catastrophic limitation. The different military branches that had requested the weapon quickly discovered that what they'd received wasn't what they needed. Tank crews and vehicle operators found that while the AKS-74U was supposed to be compact, it was still only about 20 centimeters shorter than the regular AK-74. In the incredibly cramped interiors of Soviet armored vehicles, having any rifle constantly getting in your way was problematic. They were issued special holsters similar to pistol holsters, but these were described as comically large and still cumbersome. To give you an idea of the space constraints, the interior of a Soviet T-72 tank is incredibly cramped. Trying to maneuver with even a compact rifle in that environment was a constant source of frustration for crews who rarely expected to use the weapon anyway. Pilots faced similar problems. They had to carry the AKS-74U in huge belt holsters that were both unwieldy and uncomfortable. For air crew who might only need a weapon if shot down, the size and weight seemed excessive compared to what they actually needed. But it was the paratroopers who delivered the most damning verdict. They were supposed to benefit most from the weapon's compact size, but they quickly realized the drawbacks outweighed any advantages. The reduced range and accuracy made it insufficient for their actual combat needs. In fact, paratroopers were among the first to reject the weapon entirely, preferring to stick with full-size rifles despite the size penalty. Special forces weren't enthusiastic about their new weapon either. The problems were compounded by the accessories they needed to use with it. The NSPU night vision sight was described as being almost as big as the rifle itself. Former Spetsnaz operators said the sight on the Krinkov, their nickname for the weapon, nearly covered the whole weapon and felt like having 2 bricks on top of it. The PBDAS-4 suppressor created its own set of problems. It only allowed firing subsonic ammunition, and only in single-shot mode. After each shot, the rifle had to be manually reloaded. For special operations requiring rapid, quiet engagement, this was nearly useless. Even worse, the AKS-74U couldn't mount the standard GP-25 grenade launcher that was becoming essential for infantry operations. Instead, they tried the clunky BS-1 underbarrel launcher, which one user described as making things about 10 times worse. Then came the First Chechen War, and everything fell apart completely. During the chaos of the post-Soviet period, the Russian military made a critical mistake. Instead of limiting the AKS-74U to its intended specialist roles, they began issuing it to regular infantry units. In the urban warfare environment of Grozny and other Chechen cities, every single flaw of the weapon was brutally exposed. Russian soldiers found themselves in close-quarters combat with a weapon that overheated rapidly, had poor accuracy, couldn't mount essential accessories, and produced massive muzzle flash that revealed their positions. The weapon that was supposed to give them an advantage in urban fighting became a liability. Soldiers desperately tried to exchange their AKS-74U rifles for any other weapon they could find. The weapon earned several rather unflattering nicknames during this period, though most of them are too profane to repeat in a family-friendly video. The reliability issues became critical in combat conditions. The short barrel and intermediate cartridge combination meant that not only did powder burn incompletely, but the reduced gas pressure caused the weapon's cycling system to operate with less force than necessary. This led to more frequent failures at exactly the moments when reliability was most crucial. During sustained firefights, soldiers found they could only use the weapon in short bursts before it became too hot to fire effectively. In a combat environment where suppressive fire and rapid engagement were essential, having a weapon that spits instead of shoots after a few magazines was fatal. Let's look at the technical specifications to understand just how compromised this weapon was. The AKS-74U had an effective firing range of about 400 meters compared to 600 meters for its American counterpart, the M4 carbine. Its rate of fire was 650 to 735 rounds per minute compared to the M4's 700 to 950 rounds per minute. While the weapon could penetrate a steel helmet with 100% probability at 500 meters and had a 50% chance of penetrating body armor at 320 meters, these theoretical capabilities meant little when the weapon's practical accuracy made hitting targets at those ranges nearly impossible. The AKS-74U weighed about 3 kilograms without ammunition, making it lighter than the M4's 3.4 kilograms. But this weight reduction came at the cost of controllability during automatic fire. The lighter weight that was supposed to be an advantage actually made the weapon harder to control during the rapid fire that urban combat demanded. Various modifications were attempted to address these problems, but they only highlighted how fundamentally flawed the original concept was. The AKS-74UB silent version could only fire subsonic ammunition in semi-automatic mode, requiring manual cycling after each shot. The AKS-74UN variant with a side rail for night vision scopes made the weapon even bulkier and more unwieldy. There was even a modification where the weapon could be concealed in a briefcase, with the trigger attached directly to the case handle. While this sounds impressive, the practical applications were extremely limited, and it didn't address any of the weapon's fundamental performance issues. The weapon's use as standard police equipment was eventually discontinued because its high-velocity, small-caliber rounds were prone to numerous unpredictable ricochets during urban operations, posing more danger to bystanders than to criminals. By the time the problems became undeniable, the Soviet Union had already produced hundreds of thousands of these weapons. Rather than trying to fix the fundamental design flaws, Russian military leadership made a pragmatic decision: abandon the one-weapon-fits-all concept and develop specialized weapons for each role. The replacement process revealed just how badly the AKS-74U had failed in its intended mission. For those who needed a compact personal defense weapon or submachine gun for police operations, Russia developed the PP-19 Vityaz. This was a proper submachine gun designed from the ground up for close-quarters work. For those who needed a compact but effective combat weapon, the AK-105 became the preferred choice. This was part of the AK-100 series, a more refined approach to creating carbine versions of assault rifles that actually worked as intended. These replacements worked because they weren't trying to be everything to everyone. The Vityaz was unashamedly a close-quarters weapon optimized for exactly that role. The AK-105 was a proper carbine that maintained most of the effectiveness of a full-size rifle while offering improved maneuverability. Even as late as 2023, Russia was still working to phase out the AKS-74U completely. Russian aircraft emergency kits no longer included the AKS-74U, but instead carried the PP-2001, a much more compact weapon with high-pressure ammunition that offers better penetration even against body armor. The Russian Army has announced plans to replace remaining AKS-74U rifles with the AM-17 and AMB-17, which are scheduled to enter service soon. After more than 40 years, Russia is finally admitting that the AKS-74U experiment was a failure. And yet, despite all these problems, the AKS-74U remains an icon. In the United States, it's known as the Krinkov, a name that supposedly traces back to mispronunciations by Pashto-speaking Mujahideen fighters. Though there isn't much evidence for this origin story, the weapon's distinctive appearance, its aggressive, chopped-down profile, has made it popular in movies, video games, and with collectors. Its rarity in civilian markets has only added to its mystique. As one guy put it, is the AKS-74U a good gun? Hell no. It's loud, inaccurate, unreliable, and completely impractical for real-world combat. But do I still want one? Hell yeah, because sometimes being a total failure doesn't stop you from being a legend. This shows that sometimes the most famous weapons are famous for all the wrong reasons. The AKS-74U's iconic status comes not from its effectiveness, but from its distinctive appearance and the stories surrounding its failures. The weapon serves as a perfect example of what happens when military designers try to create a compromise solution for multiple different requirements. The Soviet military wanted a single weapon that could serve as a personal defense weapon for vehicle crews, a compact rifle for paratroopers, a special operations weapon for elite forces, and a police weapon for law enforcement. The result was a weapon that didn't properly serve any of these roles. It was too big and powerful for personal defense, but not effective enough for combat. It was too inaccurate for military operations, but too prone to dangerous ricochets for police work. It was too unreliable for special forces, but too specialized for general infantry use. The AKS-74U became what military designers call a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. A weapon that could theoretically do many different jobs, but couldn't do any of them well enough to be truly useful. This failure had real consequences for the soldiers who were forced to use it. In Chechnya, soldiers carrying inadequate weapons faced enemies who were better armed and more familiar with the terrain. Equipment failures in combat don't just affect mission success, they cost lives. The honest assessment of military professionals who use the weapon is clear. It was a poorly thought-out compromise that should never have made it past the prototype stage. The fact that it remained in service for so long speaks more to institutional inertia and the reluctance to admit mistakes than to any actual military value. Modern military forces have learned from this failure. Instead of trying to create one weapon that does everything, contemporary military development focuses on creating families of specialized weapons that can work together. Each weapon is optimized for specific roles, allowing soldiers to choose the right tool for their particular mission. The AKS-74U's legacy isn't one of technical innovation or battlefield success. Instead, it serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of compromise in military equipment design. Sometimes it's better to carry two different weapons that each do their job well than one weapon that does multiple jobs poorly. For military historians and weapons designers, the AKS-74U represents a perfect case study in how not to approach military equipment development. Its failures were predictable based on basic engineering principles. Yet institutional pressures and the prestige of the Kalashnikov name allowed it to enter production anyway. The soldiers who had to use this weapon in combat deserve better than equipment that was designed more for administrative convenience than battlefield effectiveness. Their experiences in Chechnya and other conflicts provide valuable lessons that should guide future military equipment development. As we look at modern military conflicts, the lessons of the AKS-74U remain relevant. In an era where military forces are again looking for compact, versatile weapon systems, the temptation to create do-everything solutions remains strong. The AKS-74U's story reminds us that sometimes the best solution is to admit that different jobs require different tools. The weapon may have failed in its intended role, but it succeeded in teaching an important lesson. In military equipment, as in many areas of life, trying to be everything to everyone often means being nothing to anyone. Sometimes being a legendary failure teaches more valuable lessons than being a modest success. What do you think? Have you encountered other examples of military equipment that looked great on paper but failed in practice? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos about military topics like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. It goes a long way in helping me grow as a small channel. I've got plenty more stories and analysis coming up in the works soon. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.